So thanks so much for talking to me today. How did you come across the rose garden at Pioneer Park?
I had been asking pretty much everyone around if there was a rose garden or either a public one. And we're such a cold climate that I don't think they're very popular here in Bend, particularly. And all the nurseries that I talked to are like, there isn't one, there isn't one. And then finally, the Parks and Rec said that actually there is one down at Pioneer Park. And so I went down there and I saw it, and it was extremely overgrown, almost a forest. It looked like it hadn't been touched for, it's hard to tell, Jason, maybe 10 years, maybe more. And so it was the Parks and Rec that had told me that, yeah, there's something down there. And after reaching out to them and saying, all right, what about a volunteer program? And they said, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's great. I had a look when you first sent me the video and the request here. I had a look at, first of all, where is Bend, Oregon? I've been to Oregon, but just up to Portland. And it looks like Bend is central Oregon. On the west, you have sort of looks like mountainy mountains and forest. And to the east, it looks like it goes straight into sort of, I'm going to say, a more arid climate. Is that about correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah, the Cascades are to the west. And so we're what's called the high desert. So our precipitation is pretty low compared to the western side of the state. And then you nailed it. It's pretty much just sagebrush and juniper all the way to the east into the Badlands.
Great. And the location of Pioneer Park I thought was interesting because, when you first sent me a video, I was like, oh, where is that? So I did a little scan through Bend and I found Pioneer Park. And I think I'll show the viewers this as well from an overhead view. It kind of looks like it's in this area here. And that is a beautiful spot right beside the Bend Spillway on, I hope I pronounced this right, the Deschutes River. That's how we would pronounce it in Canada.
Yep.
And the Pioneer Park, it has a bunch of pictures here as well, which I'm just going to scroll through for the viewers as well. But it's a beautiful setting, like right on the river there, paved pathways. The spillway is actually kind of a neat feature as well. That's not too far away. And as I scroll through the pictures here, there's even a couple pictures of the rose garden with what looks like maybe peace or something like that.
Yeah, no, the spillway is gorgeous. There's quite a few willow trees. It walks all the way down. There's some rapids down there. It is gorgeous. Some really, really large, I would say probably 8 to 10 foot diameter ponderosa pines, just these massive pines. Just when the sun is setting and it trickles through the trees, it's just the rose gardens. I see great things for it. It's still kind of in rough shape.
So you also sent me some pictures or some videos of the rose garden as you found it. So this is what the story picks up. Is I'm going to go ahead and play a video here of the abandoned rose garden as you found it. And what is kind of interesting as I show the viewers here is it's actually a beautiful area, nice hardscape, nice setting. But as you found it, lots and lots of plants growing into it, like lots of weeds. It really was not attended very well.
Yeah, no, that's accurate. There was a couple giant old snags that were dead as well. Parks and Rec said, okay, we went out there and we walked the grounds. I said, this is what I'd like to do. They're like, okay, yeah, we can cut that down. Dead one, dead one. And then, they just kind of gave me carte blanche. He said, go ahead and clean it up. And my focus was definitely the roses. It's an interesting, unique. I went down to the city archives, and it was originally planted in 1948. It was kind of a celebratory after the war, and at one point they had up to 200 roses. It's down to 35 now, but yeah, I think 2 peace roses, and then a few others that are very special, and then a lot that are okay. But I think if we can get it really get it shining, then Parks and Rec will say, okay, this looks great. Let's go ahead and put some more money into it.
So then that's quite a history actually to figure out where it came from, and those peace roses would have been whether planted at that time or later significant to the meaning of the garden. You also sent me another video here that showed, and I'll bring that one up now, and it shows what the garden looked like a little bit after you'd done some TLC on it. First of all, I have to say, great start on this. The roses look a lot better. It's far better without those weeds in there. I see flowers on them. I see that you've mulched around the base of them with either compost or manure. And it's a much improved location, much improved already, I will say.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm definitely still new to roses. And so some of the things when I first saw it in the ancient canes, and I'm sure we'll get into this more later, but my initial thought was, wow, these should pretty much all be cut back or cut down to the ground. But it didn't feel right. You know, Parks and Rec's like, yeah, go ahead, Josh, go ahead and take care of these roses. And they come back and everything's cut down to the ground. That wouldn't have been, I don't think, objectively a very good starting point. And so with pruning, you know, it kind of followed some of the D's, damaged, disease, decayed, design, dinky in terms of smaller than a pencil. But we'll get into that more later. But I had some help from my 11-year-old daughter. It was pretty cool. It was pretty fun. She enjoyed going down there and helping. And we got some volunteers too. Some just random people saw what we were doing. People that loved the park, people that had been going there for a long period of time. Some people that were homeless that actually wanted to help, who were just hanging out in the park. And that was a little interesting because at first, you know, it was a little bit dangerous. It's like, okay, how is this person doing mentally and everything? But there were 2 homeless people that on a recurring basis would come down and help. And I got to know them. We talked and kind of went through their life story. So it became quite the community involvement in turning this garden around.
Great. Well, so even though you've got a great start on there, I can see there's still some work to do. And I think you took a wise approach, starting slow, starting with minimal pruning cuts, and also seeing what's there, getting through a season of watching what these plants will do. And this is not an insult to it, but to say that probably they still look a little bit on the lanky side, a little bit bare towards the base. And so I had some questions for you to start off here, and then we'll get right into some videos of individual plants. Is first of all, what's the sunlight situation there? You pointed the camera everywhere but up. So are there high trees in here? Are they getting some shade?
I would say the northernmost row gets some overhead maple shade. And so there's essentially 4 rows. It's full sun from the south. And there's 1, 2, roughly about 4 rows. And so that 4th row, which would be the northmost row, does get a little bit of shade. And the Parks and Rec said that we could absolutely address that and cut those down as well. So it's almost entirely full sun.
Okay, cool. That's a really good start. Second thing I wanted to do is confirm your hardiness zone, as far as I could tell on Google, is something like 6B, which you described as cold, but some of my viewers will have a little laugh at that, about how cold that is. But 6B is relatively favorable for the kinds of roses you have in that garden in general, and certainly since they've been there for so long, and these are the survivors, I don't think you have any big concerns about hardiness there. Third thing I want to ask about is the underlying soil, and this is something to know as you go in here. I'm going to read to you just quickly what I was able to look up about Bend, Oregon soils, and then you can let me know your insights on that. First of all, they say that most Central Oregon soils are coarse with sandy texture, but tend to be sterile with minimal organic matter. Soil pH generally runs a little acidic, 6.5, roughly speaking. Phosphorus levels are generally adequate. Potassium levels are somewhat high. Calcium and magnesium generally more than adequate. So all of that, of course, is taken from online resources without a soil test. But how does it square with what you've known so far about the soil in your area?
That sounds about right, about spot on. The only thing I would add is that, and these roses are all in a spot, but for putting new roses in, there's a lot of lava rock. And so finding a good spot that has enough room for the rose base has been difficulty for planting new ones. If you're like someone like myself that wants to get super precise and say, okay, let's put this rose here, start digging down, and there's this giant lava rock that might be 3 feet by 3 feet, which would prevent you from putting it there. But no, I would say your soil analysis is pretty much spot on. One of the things on my to-do, and I wanted to ask you about, is we could send off some of the soil to the state resources to get a true test for that exact location. And if you thought that would be a good idea.
It's always good to know. I mean, and certainly the city may have done already some soil testing, and your agricultural extension may also have some insights there. I mean, here's the thing. You don't really need to know specifically what's in the soil to do what you need to do. In terms of action plan, if I had what I just read out there as kind of a back of my head, you know, it's not confirmed, but just in the back of my head, the things I'd be addressing, of course, it says it's low in organic matter, and you're already talking about whether you can mulch or add manure. Adding organic matter as a top dress to the existing roses would be a good measure. The other thing about manure is that it tends to add some nitrogen, which is what the roses will need. The nitrogen cycle is such that there's rarely ever a good surplus of nitrogen in soil, and plants grow so much better with a little extra nitrogen. So I'd be focusing on those two things, more organic matter and then starting to supplement with things that have nitrogen. Sometimes those can be the same thing. Sometimes you can add the nitrogen independently, but both of those things should spur on a lot of new growth and put some new life into roses that you're trying to refresh. Particularly after next year, I'm going to be recommending a somewhat heavier pruning. And so following that, if you can start supplementing with some of those things, maybe you'll get some of those basal breaks and those dormant buds to come up from the base.
In terms of, that's great information. In terms of when, is it better to do it now? Would it be do it in the spring, both?
Spring. Yeah, most of what I'll say in this video will probably be focused on spring. You know, there might be a few things you can do right now if there's tall roses that are unsupportable, or if they have big canes sticking up that could sway around and with foliage on them. It's not a bad measure to just take them off at 4 or 5 feet right now, just to prevent some of that damage. But you'll be doing, and don't waste too much time on it, because you'll be going back and readdressing all of this in spring to get your real cuts. So you don't have to do anything right now. And about the same time as you're taking care of that cutting in the spring, and I would suggest if our climates are not too different, something like March, when you start to see the landscape come to life and bend, start to see things like forsythia and your Japanese quince and the early blooming shrubs coming out. And if you look at the roses and those red buds on them are starting to swell a little bit, that's when you'll target your pruning. And that's also when the rose is starting to look for nutrients in the soil. And it sounds like, and again, it could be confirmed with the soil test, but it sounds like it has most of what it needs, but could use some more organic matter to activate the activity in the biological activity in the soil, as well as some nitrogen.
That's fantastic. That's really good stuff.
So, since we've gotten through the basics of your location, let's have a look at some of these videos, because the first video that you sent me here was called Rhapsody in Blue. So I'm going to
absolutely my favorite rose in the garden. I'm a fragrance guy, and this one is just absolutely stunning. And there are no tags at all, and there are also no records at the city of what was planted where. So these are my best guesses after using. I think there was a rose app using Google Docs and trying to just say, okay, during this time, what's my best guess of this? So it might not be Rhapsody in Blue, but it's just the stunner in the garden.
Yeah, and it's no problem that you don't have the ID right. I was looking at this and saying, well, to me, it looks also like another blue rose that I carry. And I'm only looking at the dormant sections here, but Wild Blue yonder looks fairly similar, a large shrub rose with similar coloring of flowers. But of course, I haven't seen it in bloom here either. But either which way, they're both larger shrub roses. And what I can see is it's very vigorous. And I will also say thank you for, as you did this, you placed some numbers on the ground that I can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and number the canes, which, as we discuss which ones should be cut and which ones should be left, that's going to be useful. Instead of me saying, well, second one from the left in this frame, we can just say, well, number 4, or so on. And as it turns out for this one here, as I'm looking at it, it's got a lot of canes. I think you had something like 12 or 14 canes sticking out of the base here, all spaced out fairly well. There actually isn't, I'll just say, this one may be one bright point where you don't have to do a whole ton in terms of removal of canes. Everything looks healthy. Where you have things like, and I'll just pull into a section here, where you have things like 7, 8, and 9 are all three like right on top of each other. They're pretty close, right in the center of the shrub. And you could say, well, I'm going to just go ahead and they all three look healthy. So just to give it a little more space around those three canes, let me remove number 7 and just have it gone. But overall, the other thing I'll say about this shrub, and this is going to be sort of a general prescription, is it's a bit tall right now going into winter. And I don't know what your weather is going to do in the winter, whether you get heavy winds or heavy snow load or anything like that. But going in that tall with some foliage at the top, if it's in any danger, I would just give it a hack back straight up for level at 4 or 5 feet, just to stop it from being damaged over the winter. And in the spring, I bring it down. I'm not going to say super aggressively because it looks like a shrub rose, but let's say up to about 3 feet. Something along those lines for all of the canes that you leave in there, and then do a little bit of thinning of the canes themselves, but not a lot. So that shrub looks really good.
So I'm the best one of the group, I would think.
Yeah,
I think the others are going to have a little bit more prescription from you.
And it is nice to have a few roses there that you just love and are good the way they are, and then you can move on from there. So I'm going to look on to the next one here that you said was sort of a common shrub in the garden. And the look of it, you asked in your verbal comments, is this a rugosa or is this just a shrub rose? From the brief glimpse I got of the leaves, it doesn't look like a rugosa, but it definitely could be just a common shrub rose. Now looking at the base here, I think you are probably going to come to the same conclusions from your verbal comments when you sent me the videos as I do, is that the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at removing some of the very oldest stems on here. So I would be targeting right out of the gate things like number 2, number 4, and number 6, which are the thickest canes on this and the oldest canes. You have other canes that are of a good thickness, so that's not going to rob the plant of any of its thing. Now, you don't have to remove all 3, you could just choose 2 of the 3. So the point here, of course, is to get rid of some of the oldest, thickest stems so that the rose has a reason to send more energy back down to the shoot or back down to the crown of the plant and start sending new shoots and putting energy into the canes that it's already developed. You could also look at removing or just nipping out, just as a matter of course, the very thinnest of the canes from the base. Something like 8 would not be a bad choice. So just if it's very thin and wispy, you either take it down low and then let the shrub do a little more. Now, in terms of overall height, from what I could see as you pull away from it at the back end of the video here, I'm guessing that the whole thing is maybe 4 feet. Does that sound about right?
4 or 5, 4.5, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a bit high for what you have there, So I would probably, again, it doesn't necessarily before winter have to happen. You can, most of these, again, you say have lived there for many years without any intervention, so maybe you don't need to do anything right now. But coming into the spring, on something this style, I'd be looking at 2.5, 3 feet.
Oh, wow.
You're going to find that people give you varying advice on how low you should cut your roses. And you have the advantage here, of course, that you have existing roses that are vigorous and have lived there for a long time, but just need a kick in the butt to get going again. So the chances of them dying is low outright from a spring pruning. Most likely, they're just going to redirect their energy into healthy new shoots. So you'll find some people online say, oh yeah, every hybrid tea, bring it down to 6 inches or 8 inches or 18 inches. I'm going to say in your case, you did the first cut in the first year of just thinning but it ended up 4.5 feet. I'd say sort of split that difference and get down to 2.5 feet or 3 feet on this.
Awesome. Question for you. I mean, my preference on some of these with the older canes, and as we go through these, is there any reason to not remove all of the oldest canes? Is there any reason to, like you were saying, 2, 4, and 6 on this one, to leaving one of those old canes?
It depends on how conservative you are. So here you are, you walked into the And I'm not talking politically here, but if you walked into the garden the first year and you did a conservative thing, is you kind of left everything as it was and saw how it did. And if you're risk averse, which people coming new into a garden tend to be, they're risk averse, and then they take the more timid cuts, and well, I don't want to do all three of those. I'll leave a third one in place. And the older canes are definitely storing some of the energy of the shrub, and so if you didn't want to go to it straight away, that's fine. But it depends on the condition of the shrub. In this case, you have other thick canes that are already there and doing well. So to me, that mitigates it. And frankly, with the relationship you have with the city, it doesn't sound like they were going to do anything. And I don't think they're going to mind if you lose a rose. So I think it's a tough love thing right now where you say, okay, well, I'm going to take a harder cut this year. I did the wait and see thing in the first year. I'm going to take a harder cut in the second year and see what I can get out of them. And maybe that will embolden me for some even harsher cuts in future years, or bolder cuts as you go on. And if you and being okay with the fact that if you lose something, you lose something, because these are unidentified roses in a public rose garden that aren't doing anybody any good right now. But if you can revitalize the whole rose garden, if some are lost along the way, that's not a problem. You'll be replacing them, and that will make a better rose garden in the end.
Awesome.
Okay, so I wanted to look at a third one here. This is the case where you have basically just one big old cane and maybe a smaller shoot off to the side, but one big old thick cane. And this is one of those tests that you're going to have over, can I be brave? Can I be courageous? Because taking something that doesn't look like it has a lot of shoots down low or a lot of buds down low can be a kind of a leap of faith. But probably on this one here, I wouldn't want to let it be one cane going up to here and then some branches up at the top. I would want to see it sending fresh shoots from the base, and so I would push it to an 18-inch cut.
Wow.
Again, the timing would be in early spring, and then as it starts to send new shoots in the spring, and you're going to be feeding and adding some fertilizer, some nitrogen as fuel to help it to add some more bulk to its green this year. Okay, I'm going to look at number 4 here. It says Old Cane Hybrid Tea. That was the description that you left in the description here. And these do not look wonderful. I mean, the very grody old canes, right? And lots of black on them, and lots of hang on, just gonna get my thing here, and a little bit crusty, right? So once again, I'm just gonna say, I may repeat a few things here, but the very oldest canes on this, you can take right down to the base, and I'm just seeing like number 4 over there. I wouldn't leave but a nub of number 4 here. I maybe take off number 1, number 4, kind of right at the base, and then take the rest of them down to a couple of feet. And again, the whole point of this is just to get the energy that is definitely living in that crown and in some of those thicker canes, and kind of encourage it to send some new shoots from the base, and get a shrub that has more branching down low and more leaves down low.
That sounds great.
Okay. You had another one here that you had labeled as only 3 canes, and I only highlighted it in my thing here because I want to freeze a frame on it. You had a question in your verbal comments about what was the dotting or the purple spotting on the canes here. And my answer to you on that is, don't worry about it too much. As roses try to fight off fungal infections, the spores will land on their canes and they'll get these black dots on there. And obviously the rose has to try to fight them off. If you start chasing those purple dots and try to get rid of them entirely off of the shrub, you may end up with nothing left. Now, I know I'm already encouraging a pretty deep prune, but I just wanted to mention for people who are viewing, I have a video on this as well that I might link, is, don't try to get a perfectly clean rose. A few black dots, a few purple dots on the canes is nothing to worry about.
Interesting. Okay.
You had another one here. I'm going to pull up, actually, maybe I'll just pull this up for the viewers when I discuss it, because I can't remember which video it was, that had a cane that was stripped on one side entirely by deer, it looks like. And then the rest of the canes looked okay. And I think you and I had discussed in our previous emails about whether it would be okay to take that off in spring. And my suggestion would be to take it off right now. If half of it is stripped going into the winter, there's very little chance that that cane is going to survive the winter anyway, just because it has so much exposed cambium and all of that. So I would take that off below the deer damage regardless.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And maybe we'll end off, because it has a special place in the heart of the garden, with a video you have here called Very Old Piece, which may be original or may at least be very old. And the size of the canes on this one are very impressive. So this is another one where you're going to have to take, I think, kind of brave action. It has some nice younger, fresher canes on there, but it also has these very thick old canes. And I would be looking at something like number 3, which in this view here is right in the center of the shrub. It's very thick, and it has a very dark stem going up the cane. I would want that one gone, number 3 at least. And I'd be looking at the other old ones as well, and look at taking them off at the base. So I'm just gonna pause it here and maybe give you the numbers on those. Yeah, I'd be looking at 1, 2, 3, and maybe even 4. Now, all 4 of those at once might be a bit much to take off the shrub. So that's one of those cases where it answers your question you had earlier. Would there ever be a benefit of keeping some of the older canes? The answer is, well, you don't have much but those old 4 canes, right? So you don't have a lot else there. So you have a couple of new ones on there, but out of 1, 2, 3, and 4, get rid of 3 for sure, maybe one of the other ones, and then just bookmark it in your head for next year after, when you get your next spring pruning, and if it's recovered somewhat from this, maybe you target the other 2 old canes the following year.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's scary to take all 4 at once, and I didn't want to do that at all. It's just like, oh boy, this one is so special.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, like I say, you're trying to maintain an old garden that is meaningful to other people. You know, it pays to be a little more conservative in some cases, and you just go with your gut and your confidence level. And I would say in that case, 1 or 2 of the old canes would be fine for that old rose. Okay, so that goes through the footage that we had, and while we're talking here, I noticed that one of the other steps that you took before you reached out to me is you reached out to the American Rose Society for a consulting rosarian, which I think is a great step. So I just would want to say to other people who are interested in this, if a consulting rosarian is available and in your area, that's a good program, and they can help you with a lot of the same advice. They might have slightly different viewpoints than I do on various roses, but I think the point is not the issue of getting the right answer, it's the issue of engaging on the issue with you and having conversations like this where you can figure out sort of a good path forward, not maybe the perfect path forward. And while we're wrapping up here, I guess the final question I have for you is, do you have any other questions for me about where you go with this?
I have a ton, but in the essence of time, you know, a couple generic things, because what I've absorbed, I've read or seen through videos, and so experience speaks to me louder than what I can read. You know, we're a pretty dry climate, so I didn't know if you like the 45-degree cut rule in terms of pruning, as opposed to perfectly perpendicular. That'd be my one question. And then, do you prune to the outside bud every single time to try to maintain the shape and the design of the roses?
No, I think you're going to add, especially since you're managing volunteers in this case, you're going to add complexity where you don't need to add complexity. So the angle of the cut, I wouldn't worry about, not in the slightest. I've never seen it make a difference in a real life rose. And when you trim to the outward facing bud, you're just crossing your fingers that the plant is going to agree with you. because it's not going to do what you want it to do anyway. It's gonna shoot from that one and then the next one down, the next one down. It's going to fill in. So I wouldn't worry about outward facing bud. The plant will not obey anyway. So ultimately, when you're talking to other people who are going to help you with this, you're pruning for shape, size, and health. That's it. Don't worry about inward, outward facing buds. I wouldn't spend any time sealing the pruning cuts. I wouldn't spend any time talking about angles. You're just going to overcomplicate a situation in a way that isn't necessary.
Phenomenal. That's great. Yeah.
I noticed also you have some mulch around the base of them. Not a big deal. But in some places they were a little bit mounded over the base of the rose. Probably the roses have lived without that mulch over winters for a number of years. So if they are heavily mounded against the base of the rose, I'd pull it away. And not because it can trap moisture. Probably won't turn into anything, but that's something that I would. And certainly going into next year, if you have a wish list for the city. Can we get some, do you have a municipal recycling program, a mulch program? Can you bring in some mushroom manure or whatever your local industry is where you can get sort of bulk organic material brought into those beds and sort of cover them over? And that will help to maintain the moisture in those beds as well, rather than bare soil. And I know the Europeans love bare soil, but from my point of view, an organic mulch, whether it be wood chips or compost or manure or whatever, is going to improve the soil over time, and it's also going to maintain a more consistent soil moisture and a more consistent soil temperature throughout the season.
So are you saying the entire section of the rose garden
if at all possible? I mean, if they can get you bulk organic material, and this is just a wish list thing. I know you did a little bit of top dress around each plant, which is fine, and that's what you can continue to do. But if you can find a way to get the entire bed covered, again, I'm only talking wish list type stuff.
Yeah. So on that winterization, just a little bit of follow up on that. We kind of have roller coaster temperatures. So it was 70 and then it was 40 and then it was 19 for like 2 days. And so I was trying to figure out at what temperature to mulch the roses. And so, yeah, it's definitely mounded, but by intention, it was just to hit the 19-degree days. And then we got back up to 50. So you're saying, go ahead and pull that away. Is there any temperature?
Yeah,
I mean, it's going to get down to 0 that it should be mounded to cover the...
I don't think so. I mean, again, you're in zone 6. Again, these roses have survived many, many winters without any fussing, any additional protection by city staff. So that's a good chance that they are fully hardy to your climate. If they're hardy to the climate, roses don't typically need additional winter protection. Now, if you were in zone 3, zone 4, maybe zone 5, but zone 6 and hybrid teas and floribundas and shrub roses, if you can find a way, and clearly your garden has shown you that this is the case, if you can find a way to get them through the winter without you having to fuss with additional mulching or mounding, then don't take the trouble. Save your efforts for the spring.
Oh, that's fantastic. Jason, I can't thank you enough. This has been super helpful, and volunteer project, and reached out and trying to find a little bit of light to help me, on the path to making this garden be something super special like it was before.
Right on. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time, Josh. And if I'm ever driving through Bend, Oregon during rose season, I'll definitely be hitting you up for a quick tour.
Fantastic. Love to do that.
Okay. Thanks so much, Josh.
Thank you.